Welcome back to Mindful Objective, the show where we talk about health in a way that is clear, realistic, and easy to use in your daily life. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Sproul, integrative health practitioner and professor. Today we're talking about the Mediterranean diet. Here's what I want you to know up front. The Mediterranean diet is not a trendy plan that, you have to live on a strict food list of things you're allowed to eat. It's a long-studied pattern of eating that real people have followed for generations, and it's been tested in large studies for chronic disease prevention. It's also flexible enough to fit in different cultures, different kitchens, and different bodies. The goal today is not to make you memorize the food pyramid. The goal is to help you connect those dots. You're going to learn what the Mediterranean diet is, why it works, how it supports your body at a cellular level, and how the research connects it to lower risk of cardiovascular events and certain cancers. As always, this show's for educational purposes only. We do not diagnose, treat, or cure any illness or disease. Always speak with a qualified healthcare provider before making any changes to your diet. Now let's get into it with a simple question. When people say Mediterranean diet, what are they even talking about? The Mediterranean diet is best described as a pattern built around whole foods, mostly plants, and healthy fats. It is inspired by traditional eating Mediterranean regions such as Greece, southern Italy, parts of Spain, especially in the mid-20th century. And researchers noticed that people had lower rates of heart disease in the long term. When you strip it down, the Mediterranean pattern looks like this. You eat vegetables daily in large volume. You lean on legumes such as lentils, beans, and chickpeas. You choose whole grains more often than refined grains. You use nuts and seeds as snacks, toppings, and ingredients. Extra virgin olive oil is the primary fat. Fish and seafood show up regularly. Dairy is moderate and tends to be, yogurt, cheese, milk. Red meat is limited and often treated as occasional, not daily. Highly processed food is not the center of the diet, and sugary drinks are not part of this routine. You may notice nothing on this list is extreme. This is part of why it works. It's realistic. It's not about chasing a perfect number. It's about choosing foods that support your body while you still enjoy eating. Another thing people often miss when it comes to the Mediterranean diet, it's not just the food. In traditional Mediterranean cultures, meals are often eaten slowly with other people and with less distraction. Physical activity is woven into your daily life. Stress is still part of your life, but the rhythm tends to include more social connection. Even if you cannot copy that lifestyle perfectly, it helps explain why the pattern has such powerful outcomes. It's a whole way of living, not just a plate. Still, the food piece matters a lot, and science can help explain why. One of the biggest drivers of chronic disease is low-grade inflammation, right? This is type of inflammation that can raise cardiovascular risk, it'll worsen your insulin resistance, and it creates an internal environment that makes it easier for many diseases to progress. So the Mediterranean diet tends to lower inflammation markers in studies because it's rich in fiber, antioxidants, healthy fats, and because it naturally reduces intake of processed foods that drive inflammation. Extra virgin olive oils bring those polyphenols. Vegetables and fruit bring thousands of plant compounds that help the body handle oxidative stress. Nuts and seeds brings minerals and healthy fats. Fish brings omega-3 fats. Legumes bring fiber to support that gut health. So now let's talk about the strongest area of evidence first, cardiovascular health. If you only remember one study, remember PREDIMED. Again, that's PREDIMED. This was a large randomized controlled trial that tested the Mediterranean pattern in people with high cardiovascular risks. Participants were assigned the Mediterranean diet supplement with extra virgin olive oil, supplemented with nuts, and a low control diet. Over time, the Mediterranean groups had a lower rate of major cardiovascular events such as heart attack, stroke, which is why the trial is so widely cited in clinical nutrition discussions. Why is it so impressive about this? It's not just correlation, it is intervention. People change what they eat and the outcomes change, right? Mechanically, the Mediterranean diet supports heart health in a few big ways. First, it improves lipid profiles for many people, especially when it replaces refined carbs and processed fats with olive oil, nuts, fish. Some people see lower triglycerides, improved HDL, and better LDL quality. LDL particle size matters because small, dense LDL is more likely to be associated with that risk. Nutrition patterns that improve insulin sensitivity tend to improve the particle profile, and Mediterranean eating often supports that shift. Second, it supports endothelial function. Your endothelium is the inner lining of your blood vessels. When it's healthy, your vessels can dilate and constrict properly, blood pressure regulation improves, and plaque formation is less likely. Polyphenols, right, from olive oil, plant foods, Those support nitric oxide signaling and reduce that oxidative damage, which helps the endothelium function better. Third, it reduces chronic inflammation, and inflammation is that key driver to plaque instability. It's not only the size of plaque that matters, it is also how inflamed and fragile it is. Lower inflammation can mean less chance of rupture, which in event triggers heart attacks. Fourth, it supports better blood sugar stability. Even if you're not diabetic, frequent glucose spikes and crashes stress your system. They drive insulin higher, increase oxidative stress, and worsen your triglycerides. The Mediterranean pattern is rich in fiber and tends to spread carbs across meals in a balanced way, which helps smooth those curves for many people. This is where practical lens matters. If you're someone who eats cereal for breakfast, a sandwich and chips for lunch, and pasta with bread for dinner, you may be eating a lot of refined carbs, even if your diet is not that bad. Mediterranean pattern usually shifts those choices towards more fiber, more protein from fish and legumes, and more fat from olive oil and nuts. Those swaps can change your metabolic response quickly. Remember that. Just a change in your diet. That's where we go back to diet. Your nutrition as a whole is your foundation. So now let's move into the brain health, because it's another area where people see meaningful benefits. The brain is the energy hunger organ, right? It needs steady food, good circulation, and stable immune environment. When inflammation is high and blood sugar is unstable, the brain often pays the price. People can experience brain fog, mood swings, sleep problems, and later in life, high risk of cognitive decline, right? Are you forgetting a lot of things? Large research still continues to explore mechanisms for the underlying Mediterranean diet benefits. One recent analysis in the JAMA network reported that higher adherence to the Mediterranean diet was associated with lower all-cause mortality, with cardiometabolic factors explaining part of that association, which is very critical. While this is not the same as dementia trials, it supports the broader idea that improving metabolic and vascular health supports healthier aging. From a practical standpoint, Mediterranean eating supports the brain health by nourishing those blood vessels that feed it, reducing inflammatory signalings that can impair cognition, and increasing intake in nutrients commonly low in modern diets like magnesium, folate from food, potassium, and omega-3 fats. Now let's talk about cancer reduction. That's what got me into that Mediterranean diet, looking into that. But this is where I want to be careful and clear. No dietary pattern can promise cancer prevention. Anyone who says that is definitely overselling. So genetics, environmental exposures, infections, hormones, lifestyle, and chance all play a role. Risk can go up or down based on patterns, and Mediterranean diet shows consistent association with lower risk for some cancers and lower cancer mortality in certain analyses. So it's looking beneficial, right? A key reason for Mediterranean pattern is interesting for cancer risk is that it targets several drivers that link cancer development and progression. Chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, insulin resistance, and obesity are all connected to higher risk of multiple cancer types. The Mediterranean pattern tends to improve each of these for many people. Very important. Let us start with colorectal cancer, since this is one of the most studied diet-related cancers. Meta-analysis of prospective cohort studies have reported that higher Mediterranean diet adherence is associated with lower risk of colorectal cancer incidence and mortality. Though results vary by study, design, and how adherence is scored, a 2020 meta-analysis in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition reported an inverse association with colorectal cancer risk. So it went down. Older pooled work and reviews have reported risk reductions in that similar range. More recent meta-analytic work continues to explore the relationship and discusses mechanisms such as fiber intake, microbiome effects, and reduced processed meat intake. So what does this do and make sense biologically? It tells us that fiber matters. Fiber matters. When you eat more fiber, you increase the stool bulk and speed transit time, which can reduce the time potential carcinogens spend in contact with your colon lining. Fiber also feeds gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids. Butyrate is particular. It's associated with healthy colon cell function and inflammatory effects in the gut. So plant foods bring in those phytochemicals that influence detoxification enzymes and antioxidant capacity. That is not magic, it's chemistry. Your body uses enzymes to process compounds. Diet influences the balance of those pathways. Another factor is processed meat. The Mediterranean pattern naturally reduces processed meat intake, which is a reasonable part of the risk reduction for colorectal cancer based on broader evidence that processed meat intake is associated with increased colorectal cancer. Now let's talk about breast cancer. The research here suggests Mediterranean diet adherence may be protective, especially in postmenopausal women, though results vary based on population and study design. An umbrella review published in 2023, this reported a protective association particularly for postmenopausal breast cancer. Then there's a 2025 review that also reported an association between adherence and reduced breast cancer risk, which notes about stronger signals of specific subgroups. So why might this happen? Breast cancer risk is influenced by hormone signaling, inflammation, insulin resistance, and body fat distribution. Adipose tissue is not just storage. It acts like an endocrine organ. It produces inflammatory cytokines and can influence estrogen levels, especially after menopause. A dietary pattern that supports healthy body composition and lower inflammation may risk that in context. So the Mediterranean pattern also tends to be higher in foods that support balanced estrogen metabolism, such as cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, fiber-rich foods that help with that elimination pathways. There's also research exploring the Mediterranean diet adherence in relation to other cancer types, including head and neck cancers. For example, a 2025 study on nutrients reported that adherence was associated with reduced risk of that head and neck cancer in a studied population. In cancer survivors, greater Mediterranean diet adherence had been associated with lower all-cause mortality in those observational analyses, with inflammatory biomarkers potentially mediating part of that relationship, which may sound complicated to a lot, but it's not. Focus on that Mediterranean diet to improve your health. So if you want to hear a theme, the Mediterranean diet influences the internal environment. It lowers inflammation, better glucose control, healthier lipid signaling, more antioxidant capacity, more fiber, and better gut function. Those are levers that can influence cancer risk and those long-term outcomes. Now let us bring this down to a simple, doable framework you can use without making it complicated. If you want to eat Mediterranean style, think in terms of the plate, the pantry, and weekly rhythm. Start with a plate. For most meals, aim for half the plate with non-starchy vegetables. That can be leafy greens, broccoli, cauliflower, peppers, cucumbers, tomatoes, zucchinis, mushrooms, green beans, or whatever you enjoy. Add a protein source, often fish, seafood, beans, lentils, or even poultry. Add a carbohydrate source, such as whole grains or starchy vegetables like quinoa, brown rice, farro, oats, potatoes, or you could even go with fruit. Then add healthy fats such as olive oil, nuts, seeds, avocados. This is not strict. It's the guiding idea that keeps meals balanced. Now the pantry. If you stock the right basics, the diet becomes easy. Extra virgin olive oil. Everybody should have this in their cabinets already. This is made for cooking and for dressing fat. Canned sardines, salmon, tuna can all be quick protein. Dried or canned beans or lentils, whole grains like oats, quinoa, brown rice, whole wheat pasta, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices like garlic, oregano, basil, rosemary, cumin, paprika, frozen vegetables and berries for convenience, plain yogurt if dairy works for you, olives, capers, lemon for flavor. When you have those basics, you can build meals fast. Then the weekly rhythm. People struggle with a plan that requires a different personality, right? The Mediterranean diet can't fit into your normal life if you build a rhythm that works for you. Maybe you do 2 fish dinners per week. Maybe you do 1 big pot of lentil soup on Sunday. Maybe you keep a salad ingredients ready and use olive oil and lemon for your dressing. Maybe you roast a tray of vegetables and use them for lunch. Maybe you keep nuts in your car so you do not end up grabbing chips when you get hungry. This pattern is about reputation of good basics. So let's us address the sticking points because this is when many people get frustrated. One sticking point is protein. Some people worry that the Mediterranean eating means you're not going to get enough protein. In reality, it can be protein adequate if you plan it, right? Fish, seafood, poultry, eggs, Greek yogurt, beans, lentils, nuts, these all add up. So if you're in strength training and trying to build muscle, you may need to intentionally increase that protein. And that can be, a protein shake or more poultry or more fish. I mean, you have to kind of identify what you need for your body. That's where food tracking is very important. If you keep track of your food, you can come up with a solution on, hey, I'm not eating enough here. You can identify those patterns, I should say. You're not eating enough protein here, or not eating enough carbs here, or not eating enough fat here. But for those that know their body, they know what they eat, they kind of are on a routine, just change up that diet to eat healthier. So another sticking point we always talk about is carbohydrates. People with insulin resistance sometimes assume they must avoid all carbs to improve. Some people do benefit from temporary reducing carbs, especially refined carbs. Stop eating junk. But Mediterranean eating does not mean you eat a giant bowl of pasta every night. It means your carbs usually come with fiber, and they're paired with fat and protein, which improves glucose response. It also means you reduce sugar, refined flour, and sweet drinks, which are a big problem here for a lot of us. Another sticking point is cost. You can do this on a budget. Bean and lentils are some of the cheapest, healthiest foods. Frozen vegetables are often cheaper than fresh. Canned fish is affordable. Buy olive oil in larger containers if you can. Choose seasonal produce. The diet looks fancy on social media, but the traditional versions was built on simple food. Again, I would recommend originally, whole foods, natural, not frozen unless you have to, not canned unless you have to. But the key is canned fish is still going to be, for the most part, better than that box of cereal you're eating. Another sticking point is time. Mediterranean meals can be fast if you stop trying to make them complicated. Can of sardines over a salad with olive oil and lemon is a meal. Yogurt with berries and walnuts is a meal. Hummus, vegetables, and piece of fruit is a meal. Lentil soup, a side salad, and some olives is a meal. For me, everybody knows by now, listening to these podcasts, I do not do fish. I do omega-3 supplement, but I'm not a seafood person. Now let's talk about what we do not do, because people miss this point. You can turn a Mediterranean diet into junk food diet if you focus only on the Mediterranean cookies, Mediterranean snack chips, and Mediterranean frozen meals can still be ultra processed. The benefit is in research comes from real foods, not a marketing term. Those whole foods, plant-based. Also, do not use olive oil to cover your overeating. Olive oil is healthy, but it still contains calories and can push weight up if you pour it on everything without awareness. The goal is to use it as your main fat, not to drink it as medicine. Now let's talk about weight loss, since many people approach this diet for that reason. Mediterranean diet is not designed as a rapid weight loss plan. It is designed as a sustainable health pattern. That said, many people often lose weight because it increases satiety and nutrient density while reducing processed foods that drive overeating. High fiber meals keep you fuller longer. Healthier fats signal satiety. Protein supports stable appetite hormones. When those pieces come together, weight loss can happen as a side effect of healthier regulation. And just like any diet out there, everybody's like, oh, well, fasting helps me here, or paleo helped me here, or vegan diet helped me here. What happened was a lot of people, when they switched to a diet, they cut out those refined carbs. They stop eating out of a box. They stop eating junk food. They start focusing on working out more and doing these things. That's what leads to the weight loss and building a muscle. It's not always, that's like, they could say any diet could work for anybody. Anybody could lose weight on any diet, long as you're getting rid of the junk food, right? Why did the Atkins diet work so well? Because people focused and kept track of their food and had specific foods they ate versus eating a lot of garbage out there, right? So if weight loss is your goal, you can still focus on following that Mediterranean principles while being mindful of your portions. You can prioritize vegetables and protein, use olive oil, but measure it. Choose fruit for dessert or more often, and limit refined grains. If weight loss is your goal, you can still follow the Mediterranean principles while being mindful of your portions. You should be focused on your portions anyway. Now, I do not want to make this episode about a sales pitch, but most people benefit from a Mediterranean diet even without testing and supplements. But in real practice, personalization helps, especially when someone is stuck or has strong family history of disease. You can go to mindfulobjective.com/resources or just go to the website, mindfulobjective.com. Click on resources to download the Mediterranean Diet Guide, and it's free. So everybody should be downloading that and, learning from that. So at Mindful Objective, functional lab testing can help you see what your body's doing under that surface. For example, basic metabolic picture can show fasting glucose, A1C, fasting insulin, triglycerides. That tells you a lot about insulin resistance and that metabolic risk. Lipid markers can show if you're dealing with elevated ApoB or unfavorable particle patterns, which can help you guide you to how aggressive it is your dietary change needs to be. Inflammatory markers like high sensitive C reactive protein can indicate inflammation, even if you feel fine. These markers can help you decide whether you need to lean harder on omega 3 intake, increase your fiber intake, reduce alcohol, or focus more on your sleep and stress reduction. Micronutrient testing can sometimes uncover common gaps, such as low vitamin D, low magnesium status, low omega 3 index, low B12, low iron, for the different populations out there. When you correct a deficiency, energy, mood, and recovery often improve, and it makes it easier to stick with your diet. Supplements can support the foundation but not replace it. Many people benefit from the basics like omega 3s if fish intake is low, magnesium if stress and sleep that's like an area you struggle with, vitamin D, if your vitamin D levels are low. Some people benefit from targeted health support, if your fiber causes bloating at first, because that can be a sign your microbiome needs a gradual buildup, right? Sometimes you got to start slow with fiber. The key is to use supplements to support the plan you're already doing, not using pills as a shortcut around real food. Food is your foundation. Now, I want to circle back to the cancer risk in practical grounded way because it's easy for the topic to trigger fear. Cancer risk reduction is about stacking the odds in your favor. The Mediterranean diet is a strong way to do this because it supports healthy body weight, it helps lower inflammation, it helps improve insulin sensitivity, and it also increases intake of protective plant compounds. If you want a simple checklist that aligns with what research tends to support, focus on these habits. Eat a wide range of vegetables, including leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables most days. Eat legumes several times a week. Use extra virgin olive oil as your main fat. Eat fish, especially fatty fish. Choose whole grains more often than refined grains. Limit processed meats and keep red meat occasionally. Limit sugary drinks and alcohol and treat desserts as occasional, not daily. Move your body, daily. Get some walks. As soon as you're done eating, go for a walk. Protect your sleep and manage stress because chronic stress influences immune function and that metabolic regulation. So this is not glamorous, but it is powerful. If you're wondering how fast you might notice from the different benefit, it depends on the person. Some people feel better within 2 weeks because digestion improves, energy becomes more steady, and cravings usually decrease. Lab markers like triglycerides and inflammation can shift within a few months when regular changes are consistent. Usually that's why we say follow up on labs within, usually 90 days. Long-term outcomes like reduced cardiovascular events and lower cancer risk are built over years, right? Which is why sustainability matters when it comes to this kind of diet. So let us make this real with a few simple main ideas that help match the pattern without being complicated. A breakfast option is an omelet with spinach, tomatoes, onions, served with a side of berries. Another breakfast option is oats cooked with cinnamon, topped with walnuts and berries, plus a spoonful of plain yogurt for protein. Lunch can be a big salad with mixed greens, cucumbers, tomatoes, olives, or it can be lentil soup with a side salad and fruit. Dinner can be roasted vegetables with herbs, piece of fish, a small portion of quinoa. Or it can be a bowl of brown rice, black beans, sauteed peppered and onions, avocado with a drizzle of oil and lime, which is Mediterranean inspired even if it's not traditional. Snacks can be nuts, fruits, hummus with vegetables, or plain yogurt. If you're thinking this sounds too simple to matter, that is the point. The body responds to patterns. A pattern of fiber, plants, and healthy fats change that internal environment. Now, before we close, I want to address one important idea. People often treat the Mediterranean diet is for only people who are already healthy. That is not true. It is often most helpful to people trying to climb out of that rut. If you feel inflamed, tired, stuck, this pattern is a great place to start because it's gentle and steady. It does not require extreme restriction. It naturally reduces the foods that tend to drive symptoms while increasing nutrients that support repair. Focus on adding, not restricting. Add vegetables, add olive oil, add fish, add legumes, add fruit. When you add those consistently, processed foods tend to crowd out and naturally go out of that cabinet, right? You tend to not buy them in the future. You tend to want to eat more healthy. And if you have a medical history that requires specific adjustments, you can work with your healthcare team and still use patterns for your base. For kidney disease, protein and potassium might need modification. For blood thinners, vitamin K consistency matters. For active cancer treatment, appetite and tolerance can change. Individualization is always part of good care. Everything's personalized to you. So at Mindful Objective, we help people connect these dots and build a plan that matches their body and their seasons in life. If you felt stuck, functional lab testing and an integrative plan can help you move from guessing to clarity. So thank you for spending time with me with Mindful Objective. Keep learning, keep listening to your body, and keep taking small, steady steps forward. As always, this episode is for educational purposes only. Speak with a qualified healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine, especially if you have symptoms are severe or quickly changing. I'll see you next time. Stay well.